Hey Trauma Thrivers, lovely to see you and welcome to my video. I'm going to try and get done as quickly as possible, but just to explain a little bit about trauma and the brain. Without an understanding of the brain, I think it's so easy to blame ourselves for our trauma. But actually what I want to try and get across to you in this video is that it's not really your fault, nor is it the fault of the brain. I'm not trying to absolve you from all responsibility. We have to take responsibility for our own selves, whether it's our brain or whatever it is that is causing any form of dysregulation. But also understanding the structure of it and how it functions for you is really, really important. So the first thing I'm going to say is that we need to know that early and developmental trauma has an effect on the brain. When we feel unsafe, whether that's in the womb, in utero, or growing up in our early years, it's going to have a knock-on effect, because when we're stressed, obviously cortisol, adrenaline, stress hormones are activated, and also we go into what I call fight, flight, freeze, flop, which is submit, or friend, which is we try and attach to something. So those things are in our, what I call our downstairs brain. And what I want to explain to you is that any perceived threat or danger is going to activate those responses and is going to activate our amygdala, which is our fight, flight, freeze mechanism. So how is the brain actually designed, and why is it important that you know about it? I'm going to say that it's a brain on a brain on a brain. So we've got three different aspects to the brain. If you think about the first brain, it's the brain stem. It's called the reptilian brain, and it's really interested in breathing, heart rate, our sensory kind of motor movement type survival instincts. And that is the deepest part of the brain, and that evolved first, and so it holds supremacy because it's the number one most important part. The second part of the brain that built on top, if you like, of that brainstem reptilian brain, some people call the paleo-mammalian brain, but I call it the limbic system. And that limbic system is the midbrain. It's the brain in the middle, and it's the section that really is dependent on our attachment and our emotional development. And that's really the seat of our emotions and where they came on board. And then us lucky human beings, we got the cortex, which is the third brain that sits on top of the other two brains, and that's where our thinking and our inhibitory functions came along, and that's where our prefrontal cortex sits, and that's our top brain. So in a way, our left hemisphere, which is our thinking brain, and our right hemisphere, which is more of our feeling survival brain, is actually the upstairs versus the downstairs, as I call it. Now, what we're really good as human beings at doing is we're really good at staying upstairs. We're really good at staying in that thinking and inhibiting structure. But some of us get less good at going downstairs into that limbic emotional brain. Because in that emotional brain, in that limbic system, that's the part of us that goes on board or online first. And primarily in the first 10 years of our life, that right brain attachment brain is being laid down, and that's the basis of our emotional regulation and our functioning. So if that part of our brain doesn't get soothed, or we have a primary caregiver, let's say, who's not very good in their right hemisphere, who's not very good at regulating their own emotions or being with their own sensations, then they're not very good at attaching to our right hemisphere and to regulating our own. So they can't soothe us. So we learn, if we can't get soothed in that right hemisphere, that we become a little bit dysregulated, or we turn to substances or alcohol or other coping strategies or food or sugar to try and calm down that right hemisphere and that right brain. The other things that are in our right hemisphere is our hippocampus and our amygdala. So in that region, we're set up, our hippocampus is our memory storage system, and our amygdala is our fight, flight, freeze, flop, friend mechanism. So in that emotional downstairs brain are our memories, and whether those are scary memories or positive memories, the more and more that downstairs brain becomes dysregulated by threatening memories, the less we want to be in it and downstairs, and the more we want to come upstairs and into our left hemisphere. So really our right hemisphere feels very unsafe. It feels as if it's too activated, and our left hemisphere starts to disconnect and dissociate and move away from it. And so really the basis of trauma treatment or any therapy or any treatment is to help somebody feel safe enough to go back downstairs, to come back into the right hemisphere. We're really lucky in that evolution has made lots of connections up between brain one, the brain stem, and that limbic emotional brain. But when we come to the thinking brain, the top brain, the subcortical structures between the thinking and the feeling brain aren't very good. So it's really easy to disconnect those two. And ordinarily as human beings, you know, we like to think that our prefrontal cortex, or our thinking left hemisphere brain, and logical, linear, linguistic that it is, can do all of the decision making and choose what to do. But actually, it's our right hemisphere, our feeling brain, that more often takes supremacy, because feelings very often win out over thinking. So how do we start to calm down that right hemisphere? How do we start to learn in that limbic system and brain stem to feel safe? How do we start to go downstairs into a brain where maybe there are lots of hippocampal memories that don't feel good, that have got lots of fight, flight, freeze on them, or are activated? Or a downstairs brain that feels very, very emotionally bumpy? Well, we don't dive off the swimming pool into the deep end when we're scared of water. And very similarly with trauma treatment or any kind of therapy, we're not going to dive straight into the memories and straight into the biggest traumas and straight into the limbic system until we've done some doggy paddling round the edges and dipped our toe in the water and got people used to starting to come into the body and feel again. And sometimes I work with people who can't feel at all and cannot name those emotions or those feelings whatsoever. So slowly, slowly, it's about starting to embrace those emotions and start to feel comfortable with the sensations in the body. Now, I'll tell you a little story, because sometimes a story does help, and I don't mind sharing a personal story with you. 3 years ago, I was in the Royal Surrey Hospital in Guildford in England, and I underwent 8.5 hours of surgery. And in that surgery, I had a cut from, actually that's way too far up, from about here to here, to remove my ovaries and my pancreas and various other bits for ovarian cancer. And I went in, I remember going into surgery at 8 a.m. in the morning, and I came out, I think, at 4:30 at night. And on my waking up in the recovery room, I remember the young anaesthetist bursting into tears once I came round. So I think it was quite a long and arduous surgery. And within 5 or 10 minutes, my body started to respond. Now, having watched and attended lots of Peter Levine from Somatic Experiencing fame, his discharge videos of the gazelle that manages to escape the lion in the middle of the plane, I knew that 8.5 hours of surgery was going to have some effect on my bodily function. So I managed to say to the nurses alongside me in the recovery room, please don't give me more medication, just allow me to shake. And as I kept my breathing at 6 breaths a minute, so in for 4, holding it for a second or 2, out for 5, and I kept my prefrontal cortex thinking brain online in my adult, not my critical parent voice, going, you're safe, it's okay, it's over, it's finished, you're okay, just breathe. My body shook its head off, literally. And my legs were going, trying to discharge the fight, flight, freeze that was in my body after that kind of shock. And literally, I think I went on for about 40 minutes, and they did want to medicate me. They wanted to give me more medication to take me out of it. And I'm like, no, no, please let me do this. Allow my body to shake it off. And actually, quite literally, after a full hysterectomy, you know, lots of people said to me, oh, 6 weeks, you're going to be flat on your back, you won't be able to move. Within a couple of weeks, I was okay. And I think it was because I allowed my body to discharge that cortisol, adrenaline, and that shock. And that's what trauma is. It's that shock to the body that we don't at the time allow ourselves to discharge. The prefrontal cortex comes in, pushes it down, represses it. So we don't get to discharge it, and then it stacks up. So sometimes we've got years and years and years of stuff in our limbic system, emotional brain, that isn't allowed to discharge. And added to that, if you're anything like me, you learn very young how to quell those emotions, how to push down those waves, and that affect that we call it, emotional affect, so that we don't have to feel it. And then we don't get good at riding it. So a lot of therapy is about, and personal development is, how can I get somebody to come back into the body? How can we get them to stop medicating their emotions? How can we gradually titrate, which is a little bit like from the left to the right, to the left to the right. Get somebody very gently to start going downstairs into their downstairs brain with the breathing, with the observer or prefrontal cortex adult going, it's okay, it's old stuff, you're safe, you're all right. Because we don't know what the discharge is often. We don't know what's coming up to be emotionally processed. We know it's fight, we know it's flight, we know it's freeze, we know often we've just gone into submit, we know it's all of that. And if we can do it in a way that we're just letting the steam out, or the fizz from a Coca-Cola bottle, very gently, with compassion and curiosity that's in the adult, then we're on to a great thing. We are allowing our brain to come back into regulating that left and right hemisphere. That thinking and feeling brain can start to coexist again, rather than being at odds with each other. Other ways of doing that? Well, meditation and mindfulness for many is too much to start with when that right brain is really activated and has got lots of trauma in it. But there are things like maybe walking mindfulness or Tai Chi or walking even, because walking, as I've said before, is that bilateral left and right hemisphere stimulation. So that will work, work, you know what I mean? And doing that will start to get, like drumming or anything that's rhythmical, will start to get that left and right hemisphere speaking again. Standing back, being the observer, holding compassion, understanding your brain is trying to help you. It is trying to keep you alive. It is trying to keep you in homeostasis, even if that right hemisphere is dysregulated. Really, coming back in touch with that right hemisphere does take time. That's the job. Oh, and it's taken me 20 years to learn how to sit with that surgery and be okay enough, because of all the discharge that I have done in EMDR and stuff, to actually do that in that surgery that day. And oftentimes in EMDR, it's about allowing that discharge very gently to come up, whether it's with tears, whether it's with shaking, whether it's with trembling. So I guess the main thing of this video is, I don't want you to blame your brain. I want you to thank your brain for keeping you safe and for trying to get you to survive. And now we need to start going, okay, I know that my brain is plastic. I know that my system is plastic, and that I can change it and I can learn at any time. So the first step I'm going to take is I'm going to start to embrace the sensations a little bit by little bit. And I'm going to stand back and be curious and make no judgment. And then I'm going to hopefully keep coming back to Trauma Thrivers, watching the videos, learning about the brain, learning about how we operate. And the next video I hope I'm going to do for you is going to talk more about that attachment, that first 3 years, and how we attach to our primary caregivers and how we co-regulate right brain to right brain, which is thankfully why therapy works. Anyway, for now, I hope this video has helped a little bit, and I hope you've understood some of the diagrams that are in here. And if you've got any questions, let me know, just post them below and I will come back to you. All right, take care, stay safe, look after yourself, lots of love, bye.